Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of Digital Building Week. I'm Holly Ty, Specification Editor at Assemble Media Group. And today I'm joined by Rory Bergin, who's the Sustainability Partner at HTA Design, and Jimmy Close, the Business Development Director at MyTech. And we're going to be exploring how digital design tools and methodologies are helping to meet and exceed the requirements of the Future Home Standard. I want to start by saying a huge thank you to MyTech for sponsoring this session, and to let you know that there will be time at the end for a Q&A. I've had a few questions sent to me in advance, but please do keep sending them in and we'll tackle as many as we can at the end of the session. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to our first speaker, which is Rory. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so to introduce myself, so I'm Rory Bergin. I'm a partner at HTA Design. For those of you who don't know us, we're a 250-person practice based in the UK with several offices around the UK. This is us in our new office in Hackney Wick, which we're very happy to have moved into recently. So please come and say hello. As a practice, we work in all areas of housing. So large-scale urban regeneration, estate renewal, and so on, and include things like parks and public realms. So quite a wide variety of work, low-rise housing all the way up to quite tall buildings in dense urban environments. And our sort of skills cover the full design set of skills, from architecture, planning, large-scale urban design, down to new roles like principal designer and communications and engagement. It's interesting to talk about digital tools because this sort of goes through all aspects of modern practice, I think. And so this is a tool we developed in my group, where we talk about sustainability and how we illustrate what sustainability means. And we bring together all the issues, the sort of widest possible set of issues around sustainable development, so that people can understand that, you know, it's not about one thing. It's not just about carbon emissions. It's about lots and lots of things which affect people deeply. And we should always try and keep all those issues in mind as we progress and keep the conversation open. And I especially run a team which concentrates on sustainability, and we deliver a wide range of services. And as a practice, we've long been interested in innovation, particularly around housing, and some of our projects, Greenwich Millennium Village in the top left, Apex House, a student accommodation building, bottom left, and recently completed Enclave and 10 Degrees buildings, bottom right. Many of them built using prefabricated off-site manufactured systems. And out of that interest in prefabrication, I think we've developed an interest in how we might use digital technology to deliver some of these buildings. And of course, our clients are using a lot of digital tools to make sure that design work is synchronized effectively with construction design, so that there's no inherent inaccuracies in the construction process. And we get much more accurate construction as a result. So we have a tolerance of about 3 millimeters over about 10 stories in our buildings, which is perhaps 10 times better than we would expect with traditional construction. So there are lots of benefits in terms of digital, the digital alignment with construction processes. And as we move forward into the Future Home Standard and the kind of further refinement of buildings and bringing higher pressure onto building performance, particularly elements like air tightness, require much greater accuracy in the construction and delivery of individual parts of buildings. And while on the one hand, we want sort of an element of standardization and repetition. On the other hand, we recognize that that's not always possible because sites don't come in square or rectangular shapes. So these are prefabricated elements that we have designed and had made as parts of buildings. And often there are many of these, so each individual one might be different or an unusual shape, but there are quite a few of them in each case. So that enables the efficiency of manufacturing to take hold. And one of the main reasons we do all of this is because of speed. So we can typically build a project in about half the time it would take us to build a traditionally constructed project using a fairly well-established methodology of traditional construction on site for foundations and for cores. And then we bring the prefabricated room-sized elements and assemble them around the core. And then we assemble a usually prefabricated facade system using masked climbers. So a very efficient process where there's lots of parallel working and lots of people working in the factory and a much smaller number of people working on site. And that brings all sorts of other benefits in terms of the ability of projects to be delivered quickly. And more, it's about how we evaluate buildings. So investors are increasingly interested in the building, the digital life of the building, how the building is going to perform, how the building has performed in design terms. Is it going to meet those performance requirements when delivered? Over what length of time can we guarantee those performance requirements? And how do people working in buildings, how do they feedback? So using tools like home views and post-occupancy evaluation, how do we get information about the performance of the building using digital tools back into the design process? And there's also a lot of focus currently on embodied energy and embodied carbon. So we've done quite a lot of research and calculation about that to demonstrate that prefabricated buildings generally are much more energy efficient in their construction than traditional techniques. And this has led us to deliver a large portfolio of these building types, right up to Enclave, the one on the extreme right, which has just opened in Croydon. But these buildings don't all look the same. So even though there's a lot of standardization, a lot of repetition in the underlying technology, the buildings themselves are designed to suit their individual sites and the individual needs, whether it's a hotel, student accommodation, affordable housing, or housing for rent. Each one has a different set of requirements. So briefly, 10 Degrees in Croydon, 2 towers of 36, 38 and 44 stories, completed a couple of years ago now, and been fully occupied for some time. You can see the apartment layout and its volumetric or its prefabricated layout. And each one of those is constructed in a factory in Bedford, shipped to site by road and then craned into position. And very, very little work needs to be done on site. So the vast majority of the work has been done in the digital design process to make sure that there is alignment between the manufacturing and the design team. And then that's delivered repeatedly by the manufacturer and then brought to site and installed very quickly, usually taking about half an hour from arrival to site to being installed on the building. And coming out of that work, we bid for and were successful in obtaining funds from Innovate UK a few years ago to look at how we might develop some digital tools around all of this. And we came up with a project called CoLab between ourselves, Hawkins Brown, L&Q, and a company called Virtual Viewing. And our HTA's contribution was, a lot of it was around the providing DFMA guidance. So designing for manufacturing and assembly based on our experience over a decade of building substantial projects. Now, how do you use the plan of work as a basic structure to set out your thinking? At what points do you need in that to think about manufacturing? and engagement with manufacturing, because it's important that you engage with manufacturing at the right stage in the design process, and that you don't wait until you've finished the building and then you hand it over to a manufacturer and you hope that they can deliver it. And we've seen in many cases where that it just isn't the case. So it's important not to go too far with the design of the building before engaging with the manufacturing sector. And we developed guidance in the tool that uses clear, simple language that would enable a project team to develop an approach to DFMA throughout a project. And this was then developed as a web app, which is available through the App Store. And it has an area where there's the DFMA design guide that we created, an offsite manufactured project portfolio, so a series of standardized typologies, mapping showing how factories and sites can be linked together, and then other links to news and business intelligence. And I think this was developed as a proof of concept. And I think tools like this are going to become increasingly important as we move into a more manufactured environment, where it's important that manufacturers can demonstrate to the market the breadth of their capability on the one hand, but also clients can use tools like this to develop standardized approaches to design, and then to make those available to their design teams and to their construction supply chain. So we see these kinds of tools as sort of working both ways, both, if you like, top down from clients to the supply chain, but also bottom up from the supply chain to clients and through designers. So this just illustrates the kind of a typical apartment in 3 dimensions, and it has layers that can be turned on and off. These typologies were developed to be generic insofar as they're not designed around a specific construction technology, but the walls are designed to be enabled to accommodate multiple different construction systems. And we have areas and zones for balconies and services and so on. So they're designed to be generic, but then applied in a specific way onto specific sites. And I suppose I would summarize it all by saying that there's such strong links between offsite manufacturing and digital tools, and that these both offer really good ways to increase productivity in the sector. Productivity in housing in the UK, I think, has been pretty much stagnant for the last 25 years or so. And it's not unique to the UK. The same problem occurs in other industries, North America particularly. We think the use of these kinds of tools and toolkits will streamline and galvanize the sector's uptake of offsite construction and DFMA tools, because it enables strategic decisions to be made that affect multiple projects. So it's about moving away from the traditional approach of selecting a new set of approaches on every individual project and moving to an approach whereby once you've developed an approach, let's say around bathroom pods or utility spaces, that you then continue that throughout multiple projects. So looking ahead to the future home standard, we will see, I think, a fairly quick ramp up into the use of panel systems, for example, by house builders to achieve better airtightness across their entire range. So it's not about an individual project approach, it's about an approach that can be carried across multiple projects, and moving away from traditional project-specific solutions to portfolio solutions, which I think is, in the long term, good news for the manufacturing sector, because what they need is a strong and clear pipeline. So I've just finished by saying that as an industry, we need to embrace innovation and a digital future to increase our productivity, but also ensure quality. As the Building Safety Act sort of comes into being, and we need to continue to improve on our safety of buildings. the standards against which we design and against which we build are getting harder and harder to meet. And using these sort of tools, digitalization and prefabrication together seems to us to offer a fairly obvious path to success. So I'm going to stop at that point, and thank you for listening, and I'll be available for questions later on.
Thank you so much, Rory. I'm going to resist the temptation to ask you a question now, and I'm going to save it for the end, and instead I'm going to pass over to Jimmy.
Right. Good morning, everyone. Let's just share my screen. Hi, I'm Jimmy Close, Business Development Director at Mitech Industries. Just give you a little bit of a background into Mitech. So we're a global company. We operate across 6 continents, about 6,500 people worldwide, many different aspects of the construction industry across the world. We're part of Berkshire Hathaway, so that's Warren Buffett's little empire. And what I want to talk about today is what we've been doing with some of the major house builders. Here's just a few on screen at this moment in time. So digital construction plays a massive part, I believe, in how we can help, collaborate and work more efficiently across the whole project for construction. So the digital tools for design, manufacture, but also the operation and the facility management as well. There's a lot of technologies for the end user as well. So you can see in the screen there, we have Barratt Developments and Bellway, both of who have built concept houses. There was a Mitech trip there where we were at the Z House, which was Barratt's first concept house up at Salford University. They've also now built another one inside a weather chamber with alongside Bellway. Really what we're doing there is we're taking all the technologies, seeing how they're interacting together, so we can actually then take the best ones and build at scale going forward. So it's really been great to be part of that. A few other things about Mitech and collaboration. We not only work with masonry sector, we are also a timber engineering company and do a lot of off-site manufacture, and also timber frame houses, which in itself is a great sustainable way to build homes. It's about 20% reduction in embodied carbon for a timber frame home, about 0.9 tons of carbon sequestered per 1 cubic meter of timber. So a great way to build, and we're actually seeing a lot more house builders going towards this method. Some of the big names you saw on the screen before have actually invested tens and tens of millions on new offsite factories. So a couple of other things, I think Rory touched on it, was air tightness, which is a big part of what's going to happen when we have these thermal efficient homes. Something we've been looking at with Bellway, as we took one of their designs, and looking at the air tightness means you're going to get a really hot home, and we really need to look at the air quality, indoor air quality, which then in turn, because of the more thermal efficient houses and what we're going to achieve, means you're going to have some stale air, and we're starting to see a lot more MVHR trials with big house builders as we move towards the future home standard. And as you can see on screen, there was a lot of to and fro with ourselves. There was a third party, Zehnder, who's a ventilation company, and Bellway. And this is kind of some of the systems that may become, a standard thing in houses going forward, where there is full mechanical ventilation and heat recovery system in place. And really, that's it for me. I just want to keep it really quick, simple, so we can really get stuck into Q&A. There's the house example on the screen. The slides will come out at a later date, I'd imagine, but if you want to scan the QR code, you can have a look at the MVHR system running through the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jimmy. Am I going to invite my speakers back on and we can kickstart the Q&A? Perfect. I'm going to start with a broader question from myself that I'd quite like to know your thoughts on. What do you both think are the main barriers preventing firms from adopting digital technology? And I guess kind of keep it on a positive note, what do you think, how do you think those barriers can be overcome?
Would you like me to go first, Holly?
Yes, please, Jimmy.
Excellent. So, digital tools, they're out there. Some of the barriers that I feel is wanting to do everything yourself. So, for instance, we are a software company as well, but we can't be everything to everyone. So for me, we need to work together. So it doesn't matter if you're on an Autodesk Revit, a Techular, or anything. We need to share information freely. There is a bit of IP obviously in some areas, but for me, I don't think that the barrier shouldn't be there, because we have the tools. Very easy to use. Everybody, even has smartphones nowadays. On site you can use this. It's how we join it up as the barriers for me at this moment in time. For me, it's still disjointed. That we do share stuff through IFCs and BIM and this kind of format. There's a couple of companies out there, nothing to do with my tech, TwinView, Dalux. They're really good at having more of a platform approach. So for me, I think we need to have thinking about a platform and everybody plugs in. It doesn't matter. We need software agnostic really for me, as we need to partner with people, and that's the only barriers I see as people want to keep things for themselves.
All right.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that people mistake the idea that there's somehow major IP in software, whereas the kind of benefits in a project terms of improvements in productivity in the project terms are far greater than the sort of financial value of software. So I think it's sort of keeping your eye on the main prize, which is what is the overall benefit to the project and to the project team, rather than how I as a software provider can develop a tool that I can then sort of make a lot of money from, because as Jimmy says, sort of interoperability is key. The construction sector is made up of a lot of different players with a lot of different interests. So actually linking them all together is the key to success, I think.
Holly, can I just add something? Rory, just, perfect what he said. It made me think about something. I don't think it's the digital tools. I think it's more the workflow, actually, and it's getting people in that workflow and pulling in suppliers and manufacturers earlier in the process.
Do you think that's part of training people to use the tools and creating it as part of a system? Maybe comes with more familiarity.
Yeah, could be. I mean, we are just sort of stuck in this thing. The builder or developer will get their model done and pull some bits in, and then let's go and price that up. Whereas really we want to partner and get everybody involved, and that means a bit of trust and using maybe approved suppliers, and there's a bit of work done beforehand the project, so that you're using this person, and then you could break down the barriers, and it's more that workflow process. But we're kind of in the old-fashioned method. We've got this, tender it out, whereas if you get these people involved earlier on, we can design out a lot of issues that may arise future down the line.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd say that the way we procure buildings is often a very odd process. That we intentionally leave some rather important things to the last minute in terms of procurement, whereas actually what you need in terms of performance is you need to design all the systems in fairly early on. And it's going to be really interesting to see with the Building Safety Act how that changes, because there are going to be, particularly for high-risk buildings, it's going to be much more difficult to change how you design things post building control approval. So we'll be getting building control approval for buildings, and then that will be pretty much it. So the current process is that the building control is really only a starting point, and then then the building is procured and lots of things get changed. The future, particularly for high-risk buildings, particularly looks to me to be quite different. So it's going to be interesting to see over the next 12, 18 months as that beds in, how contractual and how procurement behavior changes.
Talking about kind of wider landscape, someone's asked, does the panel think the pandemic has had an effect on our perception of digital technologies within the industry, and if so, how?
Well, I think yes. I think it has. I mean, it must have, because we all went from working together in an office to working at a home within a few weeks. So our kind of lives were transformed. I think personally, while some of that was good, it also means we've lost a little bit of the, I think, collaborative nature of working together in offices. And so that's something I think we as a practice are keen to get back as close. We're not, I don't think, going to have the 5 days a week in the office anytime soon, but certainly as many days as are possible in the office, because it's the collaboration and the interaction between people in the end that drives the design process, and design drives decision making. So I think what we found in the pandemic was we ended up having lots of meetings, lots of discussions, but decisions were quite hard to come by. That sometimes you actually need to get together in a room to reach agreement. The other thing I would say was that what we found was super interesting working on our prefabricated buildings, that they continued pretty much uninterrupted during the pandemic. So we had 2 large projects completed during the pandemic with very little delay. So it sort of highlighted to us the benefits of factory processes and factory management, that you can manage people safely, you can manage processes safely, and you can factories are not completely fixed either. They can adapt, but once they've adapted, then they can flow through effectively and efficiently. So that was a really interesting lesson for us from it all.
Jimmy?
Yeah, I kind of echo Rory. I mean, I think having the digital tools, Microsoft Teams popped along at the right time. Sorry I know there's other platforms out there. But then it got a bit too much, and meeting after meeting. And so, we as a company had to say, right, let's make sure the meetings are there for the right reasons. We are now on a hybrid working for most people. Getting people back in's been difficult. I'm not going to lie. But me personally, I think the face-to-face interaction you can't beat. So the digital tools are great, but for me, we should still use them in the right way. The pandemic proved that we can do it, but I was on a building site last week. You could have had someone with a phone, maybe a live stream or whatever, but it's not the same. It's not the same as having a coffee with the site manager, buyer, technical managers, and on-site points. So, yeah, the pandemic had a massive impact on the whole working environment. And you know, for some people, you know, they don't want to maybe go in the office, they're happy. But for me, the social aspect of that, you know, being in you're in your home, you wake up, you're working from home, you I don't think it's good for anyone. That's my personal opinion. And yeah, we're trying to get balance right now. But pandemic definitely had a massive impact, because it forced us to use the tools, even though they were already there.
Someone else has asked about talking about the Future Home Standard, which is obviously going to have an impact on high fabric standards. And we know that material selection has such a huge impact on occupant well-being, which arguably has become quite a buzzword in the industry over the last few years. How can organisations maximise their chances for success when it comes to material specification?
I can take some of this. You know, first, you know, the Future Home Standard, you know, consultation's not been out yet, so you know, we don't know exactly everything. You know, if it's like the first stage, you know, it should hopefully be the 75-80%. Material specification, for me, the first thing that we've done as a company is made sure we've got an EPD, so environmental product declaration, right? So that's the sustainability side. But also on another part, especially with Rory mentioned the building safety, we've done a lot of fire testing, you know, on our products. Then, you know, performance testing. But for me, partnering with the home builders, the developers, people like Rory consult, you name it, you know, it is really working with the people that's going to be using your products to ensure, you know, what you're developing is right for them. Our products specifically, we've done a lot more performance testing and fire testing. So I think, yeah, European, environmental product declaration, and actually working with the people going to be using it. And it's not what's going to be used for tomorrow, it's for 5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
And we need to think further ahead than the next couple of years.
You know, I would just add to that what we see is with the Building Safety Act, a lot of focus on fire performance, but fire performance of full systems.
Yeah.
So instead of a manufacturer coming along and saying, you know, I can give you a membrane, or I can give you a board, or I can give you an insulant. Actually, what we need a full wall system, and a number of manufacturers have, I suppose, aggregated other businesses, bought out other businesses, and so on. So we're starting to see some aggregation in the sector. I would say to those who are not part of that, to get together with other manufacturers and work together to produce systems using their own components, because I think what we're all going to be looking for in 6 months or a year's time is systems with guarantees. So instead of, you know, all this individual component business, it's about, well, how does the wall perform? How does the roof perform? How does the floor perform? You know, as designers, you know, we will naturally gravitate towards the people who give us the most convincing guarantees, and who give us something that we are confident that we can rely on. Because I think we're in a very risk-averse period in the construction sector in the UK, and I think we're going to stay there for several years to come. So we don't want to hear manufacturers say, "Oh, that's not our problem. That's someone else's job." That's not really going to wash. So get together with other people, do the performance testing, and then, you know, come up with a system that makes it easy for the contractor to deliver, and for consultants to specify, and then you're there.
Do you think the government could do more to lead the industry into that direction and encourage digital adoption? Someone's asked specifically, does the Future Home Standard go far enough?
Well, I think the Future Home Standard is about right, because what it would be wonderful to say, we can go straight to sort of net zero homes overnight, and we have the technology, but the problem is viability, and it's not viable everywhere in the UK. So personally, I'm actually in favor of standards which have some wriggle room.
Yep.
So the standards focus on the outcomes. So what are the outcomes? And then it's up to the industry to figure out what's the most effective way of meeting those outcomes. Because I think that's what we're good at as a sector. We're good at solving those kinds of problems. So I don't think we need government. We don't need government to tell us how to do everything. We need government to regulate effectively. You need to produce buildings which are X or within X performance levels. And then it's up to us to figure out what's the most effective way of doing that. And the more government sets out how you do that, then the more restrictive it becomes, the more difficult it is. So we have some situations at the moment, for example, where we can't use timber frame because somebody is so risk averse that they won't use timber frame, even in buildings where it's perfectly appropriate and perfectly feasible and technically sound to do so. So simple outcome driven regulation, I think, is what we need, not government telling us how to do our jobs. I think we're all pretty competent. We can figure that out within a good framework, and the Building Safety Act and so on will give us that. The only problem is that it's not complete. It's in operation, but it's not complete. So we don't have the guidance we need. So government needs to get on with that and help the industry to produce that guidance. Otherwise, we're a bit stuck.
I think it does go far enough, Holly. Actually, this is the most changes for house building or developers we've seen in a long time. So, there's a. I don't think anybody disagrees with what's happening. It's just there's a lot, happening at this one time. So I do feel it's gone far enough. The current regulations, for instance, carbon emissions annually from a new build home is about 3.6 tons. I think the Part L uplifts in June 23 took it down to about 0.99. Future Home Standards as it stands takes it to about 0.36. So for me, that's great, and I think that is the right way to go, and I think it is doing enough. The bit that I would challenge the government, and there's been some news on this, the Prime Minister's had some changes on this recently, is actually the current housing stock. So 80% of the homes standing now are still going to be there in 2050, and that's a big challenge. So I think I said it at the building conference show is we need to harvest all the technology that we're doing in the concept houses and actually what's working. Can they work in current homes or older homes and retrofit? So retrofit's a huge area. So I think the Future Home Standard, I think, the house builders that we work with are signed up for that, and they're on that journey. Yep. They see the benefits, and I think that will happen anyway, I think, personally. But it's what we can do to retrofit is a huge thing for me. So I think that's worth mentioning.
We have a few questions come in on MMC. One of them being, are there housing typologies where MMC would not be suitable?
Apart from the fire restrictions Rory has in London and other bits like that, no, I've seen plenty, cool homes, futuristic, cool, I wish I could probably give you some examples, but no, I can't see any restrictions. I always think when it's modern methods construction, it's a bit misleading because, I live in England and I have for 23 years, but originally from Scotland, where we've built, timber homes, panels for 30 years or more, and a high percentage. But no, I think modern methods construction depend on the different levels. Obviously, when you go full volumetric, there is constraints on delivery, but certainly for standard timber frame homes, etc., you can produce any kind of house, in my opinion.
I think for more complicated buildings, I would say, or particularly for taller buildings, you need to try and figure out as fairly early on in the process which systems you're thinking of, because I think structurally speaking, different systems have quite different impacts on the building. So if you're doing an in situ frame, but you're using prefabricated facades, that's one thing. If you're doing full volumetric, that's quite a different thing. So with larger projects, you need to decide pretty early on what's the direction of travel and what's going to be the focus of the MMC. And in my experience, that usually involves an early discussion with manufacturing. So, what manufacturers are available, what ones are competent, what ones have the right systems available at their disposal to meet the needs of that particular building, and so on. And I think what we're going to see from the Building Safety Act is actually we're going to see fewer manufacturing approaches and systems for taller buildings being available in the market. But then those ones will actually probably be more efficient and more competent, because factories will then get more of a throughput, more of a pipeline, and we'll probably see a bit of an acceleration in the delivery.
Brilliant. I probably already know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Someone's asked, will standardization mean architecture is devoid of all character? Thought that would get a laugh.
I mean, I live in the Victorian house. I live in the Victorian house in North London, and it's relatively standardized, but I don't think anyone would suggest that it's devoid of character. So I think well-designed buildings, even if they're repeated many times, it may look a little, repetitive on day one, but so when the trees grow and then people paint their front doors a different color, it doesn't take much variety at all to make everything look quite varied. You only need a little bit of changes of color here and there. So I think standardization is something that people have become afraid of because of some of the dreadful projects post World War II, particularly large scale, large panel housing estates and so on. Very many periods in architecture are about standardizing and about using the materials and the systems and the products that were available at the time. So whether it's Georgian, Victorian, Edwardian, and so on. So I don't think there's anything to fear from it at all.
I agree. A lot of the major house builders who are now investing in their own MMC plants, off-site plants, they are looking at standardization, but that's more like the ceiling heights, not having an option for a 2.7 ceiling height, etc. So I think standardization shouldn't have an impact on the architecture side. Standardization is also quite a broad thing. What are you making standard? Windows, for instance, the wall heights, doors, you name it. So I think it's what you're standardizing. I think depending on if it's say an off-site manufacturer, you want to have mass standardized panel heights, for instance, but that doesn't have an effect on the outside and the look of the building. So I just echo what Rory says. It shouldn't.
Yeah. Somebody else has asked, how can we ensure that there are not future collapses of MMC modular developers and contractors such as ILK and L&G?
I have some personal thoughts in this. This is not my tech thoughts, just to make that clear. So I visited L&G and both ILK, and we were just in the process of doing a new concept module with L&G. I've also been out to Scandinavia. We have offices out there and been at some really good modular house builders. Look, there's also one, Lindbeck's family-run business, doing really great modular stuff for the right development. Yeah. It was a lot of apartments, very similar. I think you go back to the question before about standardization. And the modular side and the homes, you do get more restrictive because people, if you've got an apartment, you know, in a block and it's the same apartment over and over again, it's great modular, you know, can't fault it. Back to my first personal comment that I was going to say, and I've just went off on a tangent, so apologies, is I always go back to being a baby, right? Baby. So you've got a baby, will sit up, then it starts to crawl, starts to pull itself up, and then it starts walking. So, you know, walk before you can run. And I think in England, for instance, rather than going from masonry straight to full volumetric, let's take that first baby step to panels or timber and then closed panels, advanced panels, and then potentially find the right project for modular for residential. I think for apartments and high-rise stuff, I think modular is great. But the residential, you know, for me, to go from nothing to full volumetric without taking the baby steps in between was potentially the the issue there. And also, don't try and build a house on site in the factory as you build it on site. You know, you have to do it differently, you know. So, and it's a shame because Ilka near the end were starting to do things differently because it was in a factory controlled environment. They weren't painting walls, they were spray painting walls and other things, you know. And there is still other modular guys out there, let's remember that. Top Hat's got a really great brick slip system, 3D printed, which is the way we should be thinking, is, you know, do it differently because we're in a controlled environment. I hope that answered the question. I kind of went around a little bit there, so apologies on that.
Well, I would say that in recent times there have been bankruptcies in the traditional sector as well. So the financial pressures that we've seen, there have been similar financial pressures on the offsite sector as there have been on the traditional sector, and we've seen failures in both cases, largely due to financing underneath. Ilken particularly had a very strong business pipeline, and you know, I was surprised that they didn't find a buyer. You know, others were not quite so strong. And if you look at the modern car industry, there are very few names today of car companies that were around 50 years ago. So you know, even the largest manufacturing companies and systems in the world do change, get bought by other people, changes of technology and changes of digital systems and so on. You know, so you look at Tesla and how they make their bodies compared to how other car manufacturers have been making their bodies. You know, it's a different approach. So I think we're in the early days of manufacturing. I think we will continue to see some companies come and go, but you know, we've been very lucky to work with Titan Vision and have delivered roughly a building a year with them for the last 12 years, and have others in the pipeline. So I think you can look at failures and say, well, why are they failing? We can also look at the successful companies and say, well, why are they succeeding? You know, and in their case, they're succeeding because they're an excellent contractor and an excellent manufacturer. So they don't just focus on one part of the business; they focus on the two, you know, main parts of how you deliver buildings. So you've got an excellent manufacturing system, but in the past, some of the modular manufacturers have focused on, in fact, lots of the panel manufacturers do the same. They focus only on the panel systems and not really on how they're put together, and they sometimes leave it to other people to put them together. Whereas, you know, in our view, you know, you kind of need that joined up approach where the MMC manufacturer and the contractor are kind of joined at the hip. The stuff arrives on site and it gets used immediately. It's not sort of thrown in a corner and kind of left there to get wet and damp and so on before being used on the building. So, you know, you need that interaction between manufacturing and construction to make the whole thing work. It's interesting that we get inquiries because of our experience in this area. We get inquiries from all around the world, from clients in difficult urban, dense environments looking to design and build buildings at speed. And many other countries have the same problems we have in the UK of a declining labour force, of a lack of intake of younger people coming into the labour force. Possibly some of the remote working, that people want to work from home or work, they don't want to travel for several hours around the M25 before going to a building site. So it seems to us that manufacturing is a solution to an awful lot of problems to do with modern construction, and it's more sustainable. It's safer for workers. Workers in these factories are moving to be near the factory, and they're cycling to work, and they're sending the kids to local schools. It's a much nicer life for them. So it has a kind of inevitability about it to me. But Jim is correct that there are lots of building typologies that are suited to panel systems. So let's build them with panel systems.
Yeah.
Not everything has to be built in 3 dimensions in a factory. So it's a long-term process. It'll take decades. But we can and should, I think, assist companies to be successful in the area, because I think they offer a great future. And they're the kind of businesses that young people will want to join. Businesses that are digitally run, businesses that are safe, businesses that meet all the ESG targets, businesses that people will invest in. So yeah, I see a bright future, but there will be some more bumps along the road.
Thank you. Question from Tom. How will the second staircase requirement influence the future design of high-rise volumetric construction?
Gosh, we're being very specific here.
I
could pass that one in a Rory.
It's not really going to have it's not really going to change matters. We'll just design cores appropriately. Everything else will be the same. We've already done a few.
Yep.
Hasn't changed much. The problem with the 2 staircase thing was not the idea of the 2 staircase. It was the haphazard way in which it was introduced.
Yeah.
So we've had government saying, oh, it'll be 30 meters, and then we've government saying, oh no, it's going to be 18 meters, and so projects that had started in the design process redesigned themselves around the 30-meter rule, and now they're having to redesign themselves again around the 18-meter rule. I mean, it's just pretty poorly managed. I have to say, pretty poorly managed.
What process would you both say that firms should undertake, or questions that they should ask themselves when they're finding the right digital technologies to implement for a specific project? What should be kind of the starting process?
I can go first now. I wouldn't say for a specific project. You've got to think about every project's unique. Every project is different, and projects as we go forward in the future will evolve. Popularity for me is one big thing, as a company. So why is other people gone with it for a start? Yeah. And 2, if it is one of the leading brands, your recruitment's going to be easier, etc. But I don't think there's one bit of software that's going to do everything. That's the other thing. We're working a lot in the residential, the homes, home builders, residential space, and Revit. Autodesk Revit's a very popular one, but not everybody uses it. And then you go to other steel, Tekla. Sorry for name dropping all these, but they're getting free publicity out of this. You really have to sit down, get them in a room, the software suppliers. Don't be pressured in picking the software. Take your time, make sure it's fit for purpose, trial it. A lot of people give you trials of software, or get them to come and here's a job, design it. Don't give them it beforehand. If it's a huge decision, see how it operates firsthand. So the other thing is, depending on who you are, one software, like I said, may not do everything. So how does the software you're choosing interact with other bits of software that you have in your company, ERP systems and all this other stuff that you may think is really important for your company. So not an easy answer, actually, that one, because I don't think there's an easy option to say, yeah, you should always go here. It's a big choice for any company to change software.
I think you also look on it like as you would at any other investment. What's the return on investment going to be? So you look at, what is the workflow that it's going to change? What is it going to do to your own costs? So if it's going to make your, a team 50% more effective, it's pretty easy to calculate a return on investment. I think if you can't calculate a return on investment, then I'd question why you're doing it in the first place. If it's not going to bring you fairly immediate, fairly calculatable benefits, then is it really worth the expenditure? I think too that the way the sort of software world is going is we're kind of moving away from sort of big monolithic platforms to much more agile systems. You look at what our phones have become. A phone used to be a tool that you just took a phone call on. Yep. I mean, that's the last thing we think of doing with one of them now, because we just have access to hundreds and hundreds of tools. So, the sort of software world has changed dramatically in the last decade. And that's also having an effect on what we do with our laptops and our desktop computers. I think software is becoming smaller, more agile, more specific, which is actually probably more useful in the long term. So I'd say calculate return on investment, and if you're not getting one, then why are you doing this?
Yep. Thank you very much. We've only got a few minutes left, so I think I'm going to finish with, if both of you could have the audience walk away with one piece of information, what would be your kind of key takeaway for the session?
I'll go first, Jimmy. So for me, I think it's all about early interaction. Yeah. So big projects, they're a complicated thing to design, they're a complicated thing to construct. So early interaction between design team, clients, contractors, and manufacturers is what, in our experience, has led to effective, efficient delivery. So don't wait until you've designed a building to figure out, who's going to make the components. Talk to the component manufacturers, talk to the offsite manufacturers at stage 2 of the REBA stages. Don't wait because you can easily design your way out of being able to use some approaches or systems, and those approaches and systems might be the ones that are going to give you the big benefit that you're looking for.
For myself, the biggest thing I would say for anybody to take away is this is the first time that I've seen in 30 years of working in construction change really feels like change is happening, with the digital tools and the Future Home Standard and everything we've talked about. For me, the takeaway is don't be frightened of the change. Get on board and be part of it and help drive the change rather than sitting back and waiting. So for me, it's I think we all agree. The global warming thing, for instance, that's not even a question anymore. We know it's happening. We know we need to do that. So we have to build differently and better to get better performing homes, for instance. So for me, just don't be frightened to change and challenge. Let take it and embrace it, and really go for it.
Thank you so much. I'm afraid that's all we have time for. If I didn't get to your question, I do apologise. We've had quite a lot to get through. Thank you so much to our speakers for their time and expertise. Really do appreciate it. We do have another session this afternoon, which will be chaired by our Head of Content, Carl Brown. He'll be exploring digital design for high-performance buildings. And we have a number of other sessions throughout the week, looking at AI, the Building Safety Act, and the Golden Thread of Information. This session and all of our sessions from the week will be available free on demand for 12 months via the same link that you joined by today. So if you want to rewatch or share with a colleague, then please do. And thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely day.
Thank you, and bye-bye.